transparency here in Brazil. I think that's it.
Wow.
Cool stuff. A lot of cool stuff happening. Yes.
Hello, I'm André Eugebaert from Belgium. And last year I had the chance to develop a frictionless Darwin core converter that converts Darwin core data into frictionless data package. Yeah.
Super welcome. Welcome, Andre from Belgium. Daniel from Brazil. It's so awesome to have so many people. Who's next?
I'll jump in very quickly. My name is Ben. I'm pretty new to the project. I haven't worked or collaborated on anything, but I came across it through a colleague of mine. We both work in data science within the UK government, and the frictionless data stack is something that I thought was really cool, and just want to see where it's going. And I've started trying to adopt it for some of my projects at the moment, and also how much I can use it going forward.
Great. I don't know, is it okay if we see your faces? So we could, yeah, thank you. Great, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Gift Egwenu, and I currently work as a developer at the Ethiopian. And I'm also a developer evangelist for frictionless data. And this would be like our very first virtual hangout. So thank you all for joining us. And the idea for this hangout is basically to come together as a community and share some updates, what we've been working on frictionless data, and also get feedback from the community as well. Yeah. So if anyone else wants to introduce themselves. Good. Okay, I take it.
I can introduce myself. People might not know who I am, so go ahead. But I mean, I really do invite people. Cleanthus, if you're there, or Chidima, it would be great for people to say. But I'm just going to. So, hi everyone. I'm Rufus. I'm the founder of Open Knowledge Foundation. I'm the kind of co-founder of Open, and also I started in fact this project. So it's a real privilege to be here with everyone. I'm really excited. I think frictionless data, we've been working on it for about 15 years, on and off. Almost.
How do you enable the sound?
You've done it. Whoever that is, you've enabled the sound really effectively. So welcome, whoever that is. Welcome, Carlos. So yeah, I'm just really excited to be here today. Welcome everyone. I'm super excited about where the project's going and to see everyone and hear how you use it or what you'd like to see in it or any feedback you have or ideas you have or anything from my perspective. Great.
I think I would like, if there is nobody wants to start, maybe I have a question too, actually to Rufus. And it's more about the vision, and I see a very strong, we are leaning towards open science. And is this something we should start putting to focusing solely on that, or we should start sharing the time? Because my question is because there is a lot of stuff going on here in Brazil in particular because of the pandemic, and it's a very internal thing, but what's happening is that states are starting to declare that they can use money, resources without a lot of bureaucracy because of the urgency. So there is more requirements, let's say, from journalists and universities are actually championing this to try, even without the bureaucracy and the transparency triggers, to monitor that stuff. And as I forgot the name of the other Brazilian guy, anyways, but as other people already said, we are starting even to use the frictionless spec to try to help on that. So this is not something that related to science, but I feel it's very urgent right now.
Yeah, totally. So listen, I mean, first of all, I think like how to put it, like node packages, like if you're a code developer, like node packages, or if you're in Go, there's a Go spec, I think, or whatever. It's not like, oh, we only use node packages in science and we don't use them in civic tech or in data engineering or data science in government. They're a kind of general purpose technology. And for me, the frictionless specs and the stack, the technology stack associated with it, is really applicable in data engineering, data science, data-driven science and open science, civic tech, each of those areas. Now, as a certain reason, just to do with the funding of this project, you're doing great down there, aren't you? Why don't you join in the call a little bit? Okay, I know you're going to like that. Basically, because of the funding of the project a little bit, the way we've been funded by the Sloan Foundation, there's been quite an emphasis on open science stuff, which is wonderful in the sense of we've been able to reach out to that community a lot. But I personally actually think that this huge opportunity of this tech stack, in core data engineering and data science, in every area personally. So Daniel, to answer your question is totally, I want to see this used in civic tech, by journalists, and in government, and in anyone else doing data engineering, data wrangling, data science work, basically. That's the vision. I mean, the vision here is we're bigger than Panda. I mean, like the vision here, I go for it, it's like, and I don't mean it in like because the project wants it. The reason I started this project originally was that, and it started kind of with CCAN, is to really unleash the power of the data ecosystem. You need to be able to data needs to be able to flow. Like I actually thought that our new tagline should be like data like water or something like that on frictionless data. But if you've done much work in data over the years, it doesn't matter whether you're in science, you're in civic tech, it's painful. It's quite painful to move data around repeatedly, reliably, to combine data together. And the original vision really came from software, which, there's this incredible miracle that you can install a software package and, if you do npm install, like 500 packages get downloaded onto your machine and sort of work together, mostly. And that just didn't really exist in data in that way. And I think it's particularly relevant. I think it's relevant particularly for the open data community, but I think actually it's becoming relevant for all of business, everyone, because they increasingly got data flowing between different systems. It's not like the old days where you just had one big data warehouse to rule them all, and you would push all your data, one time from your online transactional processing into your warehouse and do analytics. It's a very rich ecosystem right now where data comes from many sources and goes to many uses. And I think the real vision of frictionless data was to really start to enable that to happen, and do it in a really simple Zen way. Because I'm not saying that vision is original to frictionless. What I think is different is I've been involved in many spec initiatives and I've used RDF, I've used many different tooling, was a kind of ruthless focus on trying simplicity here of the kind of minimal viable spec, the minimal viable toolings. And ultimately here, and this is where I get a bit geeky and it got voted down, but the Unix philosophy, if people know that, the vision of, the thing that Unix had that was really big was they said, okay, we're not going to have some command line tool that does everything. It's going to be one tool will do grepping, one tool will do, echoing, one tool will do this, one tool will do that. And then you combine those tools together to make a very rich, powerful thing. And I think and I want to explain that I think the vision of Frictionless at the moment is starting to go beyond the specs. I think the specs are becoming mature, but the tooling and the little bits of tooling or other people's third-party tooling, but that you could kind of, in a Unix philosophy, really be what I call like, become almost the beginnings of a data operating system. Like, how do you build data infrastructure quickly? Well, you have standard patterns like pipes in Unix, and then you have lots of standard little tools that, you know, they do validation, they do little bits of like presentation, they do little bits of transformation. Hey, you knocked your head. Sorry, that's a good moment for me to pause. We should introduce a few more people on the call. That was a great question. Maybe we should do an introduction question kind of thing. Anyone else who's joined want to introduce themselves? I think I saw Johan a moment ago. There's Carla. Who wants to say hello and introduce yourself on the call? Be awesome.
Hello. We are trying to disable the background, so maybe it will sound better in 2 minutes. We had a party the other week.
Does anyone else want to introduce themselves?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Chidima Ezekwe, and I'm a software engineer at Detopian. I currently work with a content crew on the frictionless data. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too.
Hi, my name is Johan Richer. I work in open data in France, basically, and I have used frictionless data for some years now, and especially table schemas and stuff like that. But looking to forward to working with Second and Second Next Gen also, and yeah, so I'm really glad to be part of this community and to meet some of you for the first time. So nice to meet you all, and yeah, to discuss the future. I think I've joined. I missed the beginning of Rufus' speech, but I really enjoyed what he said. So yeah, I am looking forward to hear also what you guys have to say about all this.
Great, thanks, Johan. Does anybody else want to do an introduction?
I'll say hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Lily. Sorry, I joined late. I had the time wrong. I am working with the Open Knowledge Foundation and work on the Frictionless Data Project. So I've probably communicated via email or on GitHub with a few of you. Yeah, I'm in Texas, so I'm a little bit different time zone from everybody else. So yeah. And then it looks like a few of our OKF members joined as well. Yevgeny, would you like to give a brief intro?
Hello.
Hey, Evgeny.
He's muted if he's speaking.
Maybe took an intro very, very literally.
I think he's having connection issues.
Yeah. Okay, I'll move on with the agenda, if that's fine. Yeah. So part of what I wanted us to discuss today or talk about is what Rufus mostly said, is about the tools. And we've recently published a new website. I don't know if anyone here has noticed, but we recently published a new website, and we're currently working on revamping the Frictionless Data Guide. So basically, we're trying to create a guide and also create something called the How To's Guide, which will basically help you with most of our tools. So we'll have tutorials on how to walk through most of our tools. and we're looking forward to release this as soon as possible. But yeah, happy to get feedback from the community if you've checked it out, or I can also share a link now if you'd like to check it out. That would be great.
That would be brilliant. If you put the link in the chat, Gift, maybe also share your screen quickly so people get a sense, even if people are checking out at the same time.
Okay, yeah. Sure. Great, so this is our new website. Let me quickly share a link to that. Okay, thank you, Chidima. Yeah, we are currently working on this. We are currently working on pushing out something called a guide. And basically this will walk you through each of our tools. So we'll have a detailed guide on how to use every one of our tools. Currently we have shipped one for table schema and group tables. So how to do validation with group tables. And we're looking forward to do more in this area as well. So if you have time to go through it and give us your feedback, we really appreciate that. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now. So now I would like for anyone that has any question, feedback related to frictionless data, you can go on to ask your questions.
Hello everyone. I'm Usaho.
Hey.
I currently work with the Ethiopian, and I have a question. I was wondering, frictionless data, because I have some experience with it as well. I've used it, but I'm more conversant with pandas. So my question is, what's the big differentiating factor between the frictionless data and pandas vis-a-vis the way the API is expressed to developers? What makes frictionless data different from pandas?
Shall I have a go at answering that?
Sure.
I don't know, Gift, or you want to have a go? I don't know who would like to have a go at answering that. It's a good question, great question.
Yeah, I think you can.
Well, so Austin, there's two. I think there's a couple of things. One, so first of all, just to check, is everyone here on the call probably knows of pandas? I'm just going to check. Just put your hand up or shout out if you don't know about pandas, because you might well not. It might do other stuff. I'm assuming people do. So, first of all, in a sense, like pandas is like a specific tool, an amazing tool. I think one of the most widely used tools in data science, probably at least if you're in Python, but generally an extraordinarily rich and powerful, and it has a lot of kind of increased functionality it's got built into it. It's by contrast, the core of frictionless data is in a way a set of patterns or specifications to start with, saying here's how you describe data, and in particular why that's useful is not only just because you might want to store data with that information, but so you can pass it between different tools. I guess one of our philosophies is that there's going to be a lot of different tools out there for working with data. One of them might be pandas, and for example, pandas has support built in for kind of loading frictionless data, data packages or data resources into pandas, for example. But so just to take an example, and there are some tools. So to kind of say I think that's one answer, is that there's these kind of patterns for describing data, and then there's pandas which are a tool for doing stuff. It's a bit like you've got a screwdriver, and you've got a specification of like what the head of the screw looks like, so that you could put your screwdriver in and turn the screw, right? That's like, we kind of specify a little bit like what those screws look like. In addition, though, there is tooling, and you only want specifications so you can build tooling. Like, you don't need, you describe the top of the screw so you can have a screwdriver. You don't really care about the specification in itself. Now, in terms of the tooling, I think the relationship and distinction is that we don't really want to have to create tools that are out there. I think there's a little bit of a philosophical difference, which I think Pandas is an extraordinary tool. I think it's amazing. I use it. It is a little bit like, it's gargantuan now. It's like got a lot of function. I don't know how many different, every time you want a new format, I see a lot of people who come to apply to do data wrangling with Datopian. And it's like installing pandas is like several hundred megabyte. I mean, you've got NumPy, or you've got other stuff. You've got you've got the whole 9 yards. I see people who install install pandas to open a CSV file nowadays quite frequently. And it's like, I'm sorry for the wonderful background noise here. So I think there's a little bit of a philosophical difference, which is that I personally think the future of a lot of data wrangling is a little bit smaller pieces loosely joined. Then maybe that, I think Pandas is going to stay around. It's just awesome. And what it's wrapping and underlying that, but for example, if you really want to build, I see people doing sort of data transformation flows in Pandas, like they'll load a data frame, they delete a column, they delete a row, they do some other manipulation. And there's a certain point where that kind of, doesn't work anymore. And so at that point, you want an actual data flow system. You actually want something that allows you to build processors, build a directed acyclic graph of transformations, and I think
pipelines.
Gracefully can do that. So anyway, that's an answer, I hope, of kind.
Great. Does anybody else have a question, feedback, anything?
Yeah, I have one more question, and it is about the Data Hub, and more specifically about the Data Hub API. And I have and more specifically, when you try to use the Data Hub from a service that is running out there in the cloud and is not developed in Node.js or anything like that, I have a hell of a time actually. I gave up. I couldn't use the Data Hub API to restore some of the data I would like, some of the packages I was producing in one of my projects. And I would just wanna, and I've been using frictionless data for quite a while, so it was not some, let's say, first come, issue. It was actually baked into the way the logging system is designed and so on, and you need to pop up a browser window and to start cookies and so on. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to be the bad cop here and try to say the design is bad. I'm just trying to say, is there any effort or there any plan to make it easier to use the Data Hub API? I think that is the summary.
Yeah. So just for people, by the way, who just maybe you're not familiar, maybe GIF, while I'm talking, you could just pop up a window and show datahub.io, just so people who maybe aren't as familiar with Daniel know. So just if I'm getting it, you're asking Daniel, which is that you wanted to use the API, like you wanted to get a kind of key to write stuff to the API or read stuff from the API. Is that right? Yeah, and the current...
I was actually able to get a key, it was 6 months ago, so
yeah.
Some stuff might have changed,
but writing. But what you're saying was writing. You were trying to write stuff, I suspect, you were trying to store stuff. Yeah, okay. So the I mean, I'm not going to go too into technical. So one thing is, Data Hub IO is sort of like it's rapidly becoming like the next kind of the evolution of where CCAN may go in terms of architecture. So just for people, it was built about 3 years ago. as what Data Hub IO is what was ccan.net, which was where ccan started. And it's completely built around frictionless data. All of the data sets that you get, the data you push is built around the frictionless data specs. I mean, what I'm going to say, Daniel, is if you could open an issue about it, maybe. I know exactly what you're talking about, which is the flow is somewhat complicated in the sense of like you have to do several steps over the API, and it should be a lot simpler. Like you just give me a file and boom, off it goes. Yeah, there are plans to dramatically improve that. And there's a node library, but what would be great would be like a Python SDK and a or something that just wrapped that flow. It's kind of like
Go SDK, please. I'm just kidding.
You want to Go SDK? I got it. Well,
just kidding.
We'll work on that. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it's something that yeah, I'm actively working on actually with ccan also right now. There's a convergence between ccan and the Data Hub architecture right now. So watch this space. Within the next 3 to 6 months, that will be dramatically improved. Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Just to mention, we also moved out of GitHub and we're currently using Discord for communication. So I'll drop the link on chat in case you're not on that. So you can just join us there as well.
I mean, I also, just while Gift's doing that, anyone here, if you got any updates, I mean, obviously questions, queries, also you can put them in the chat if you're shy. There's people on the call. If you want to put your hand up, I think there's a method, like, yeah, I can raise my hand and lower my hand. If you don't know it in Zoom, you can kind of put your hand up if you've got something you want to say. But, maybe like, I'm going to maybe just put like, Johan, maybe you could just share very briefly, like you're about to publish a blog post. You've been doing some stuff around table schema. It'd be great to hear stories from the community of like where you've been maybe using frictionless specs, where you've run into problems, where you'd like to persuade other people to use them more and they've got questions. That would be just great to hear.
Yeah. So there is a lot to say about frictionless data, but I will just focus on the story I have about some work I've done for some years with people in France and what it can lead to in the next months or so as part of frictionless data. And it's the story about table schemas. So in France, it's like in many other countries, there is a central state authority which has a portal. In this case, it's data.gouv.fr, and there is a lot of data sets. And there is also a community, a local community, open data community, and there has been a lot of data set commonly published by local governments. And there is, in this community, people sense that there should be some kind of standardization. So people agree on a way to publish one common data set. For example, the very common data set in France published by cities is the names of the newborn babies for a year. So it's a very, silly example, but it's actually a real case example. But there are many others like budgets or, addresses, stuff like that. And since it's published by many local governments, let's agree on one way to publish it. The columns, the structure of the data, how the columns are named, the labels, stuff like that. And so for a project with Open Data France, which is a CSO, civil society organization of France, we propose to use table schemas for that. And we use good tables, in particular the Python library, and we developed a front end for France because the good tables was to be translated, and there was some special cases to have like special checks on some values or stuff like that. So there was some customization, but it was based on good tables and on all the specification of frictionless data. And so it's been 2 years now, and the central authority, so it was a civil society project at the beginning, and the local authority, national authority, Etalab, came up with a national catalog for those schemas called schemas.data.gov.fr, which is a central URL. And so people have added schemas, and there are stable schemas that can be validated with the tool, and so it's very useful, but it's only for the national, regulated schemas. Like there are some laws or bills that explain how data should be published for some data sets. So this catalog is really dedicated to that use case, a central top-down approach. But what we need is a new community catalog for all the countries, all the organizations, because many people are publishing data sets that are similar and common, and we should find ways to agree on the way to publish it, so that when we publish, we can validate the data, and we can improve the quality of the data sets. So there are a lot of benefits to have from that. And that's the point of this project. So it would be a new catalog, managed and edited by Frictionless Data. And it's the point of this blog post that Rufus alluded. And I hope that we can publish it. There is a draft. Actually, right now we can take a look on the forum GitHub, Frictionless, on GitHub, Frictionless Data Forum. There is an issue about stable schema catalog, and you can read on that if that interests you. And I'm very happy to talk about it and to have feedback. For now, it would only be a blog post, and we are looking for people to help on that project. And the more feedback we have now, and the better it will be later. So yeah, this is just an example, and in France it's a small example because we are talking about tens, maybe 100 people, but people are becoming attracted to this idea of frictionless data in France, and now it has the stamp of the administration, the states. So we are seeing again today, I've seen a new schema published by an administration actually about the virus, the Institut Pasteur, which is a medical institution very known about I don't know the word, but I think it's immunology. And they have published a schema to say how to publish data about this kind of stuff. So it's just one example, but like Rafa said, people are using it because there is tooling. They are following a specification, not just because they like to control things. They like to have the benefit of tools. People use the specification, they will benefit from the tools that goes with that specification. And that argument is very, very efficient when you have the tools and you show the interest.
Great, thank you, Yohan. Yeah, I think it's a very great idea to have like a tool that collates all table schema catalogs. Does anybody else?
Can I say one thing on that? I mean, this is just massive, guys. I just want to really two things of that just to emphasize. One is, Joan, we should write up about the government use case, but just for people, just so people get the context here, that's super useful, and it's kind of been there in our minds actually for several years. Is okay. If people are familiar, the table schema in frictionless data describes, it's really simple. It describes a bunch of CSV. And like I always say this about the frictionless specs, they're really dumb. I mean, there's nothing very innovative or original, right? The analogy I always talk about is like a steel container for shipping. The steel container, if you've seen those steel containers for shipping, they're really boring. I mean, there's nothing super innovative about a steel container, okay? It's just a certain width, a certain height, and it's made of steel. But it revolutionized the shipping industry. Okay. And similarly here, it's like the hard work, by the way, about standards and specs is getting adoption. Like coming up with a spec is really easy. Maybe coming up with a good one is not so easy, but you know, the hard work is getting a spec that does do the things you want, the tooling around it and the adoption. I think we're getting that critical mass, you know, like this toboggan's moving. Now, what I want to say here is kind of coming to that is once you got the spec and the table schema, what Johan's talking about here, to really draw it out for everyone is, well, a really useful thing once you've got a really simple way to define the columns in a CSV or in a database is having a way to share them and having a common reference point to discover them. Because, you know, you start to have this ability of like, oh, okay, because that's the killer in data, right? If you've ever done data wrangling, you know, or data work, it's like people publish their stuff in slightly different ways, in slightly different formats. You know, you can't even read the spec. If you have that, that would be so major. And it's so simple right now, which we just, you know, it could just be a repo, a Git repo where we store the table schema JSONs or something, you know, for whatever, and we can make it a bit more fancy. So it's kind of a catalog of those schemas and an ability, I think, to reference them. Because remember, tables, in theory, the data resources, you can point to a remote one online. So people can start being like, oh, just my stuff all uses this table schema or whatever. And so this is a really big deal if we get going. Number two, just as Johan's being modest, he's kind of spearheaded this. If there were one or two other people in this call who would like to say, you know, hey, I'll hang out on chat or I'll catch up with Johan and help move this forward. Now, I'm going to help do that too, but it would just be, I think it's a really cool mini community project. It's something that probably you can knock up in an hour. You know, we create a Git repo, we put up some GitHub pages and just push the schemas with a nice rendering so people know what the fields mean. So there's a nice, you know, HTML page for every schema. You know, maybe we put in a namespace, you know, at some point or something, but you know, it could be super simple. Submit a new schema via a Google form. I don't know, but there's a lot of just small things. This is a tiny micro project that, I don't know, like that, I think could make a huge difference, you know, to the, you know, would be hugely useful. So just to put that out there, if anyone wants to shout out now, just shout out or put your hand up on the chat or on Discord, or if you want to think about it, like just come back. But it's something that I think in like, you know, an hour, a couple of hours of hacking, you could have something really useful working. And I think if I'm right, Johan's brilliant, but I think he's not a developer. He's got developer colleagues. He's the more valuable part of the duo, right? He's the brains.
Not really, since I'm not a developer.
I know he's developer colleagues, so I can say that they're also brilliant too. But
yeah,
I'm just saying,
a very small team, but the point is that it's a frictionless data project, and people with other, you know, point of views from other countries should, you know, at least give feedback. But yeah, it should be a really simple. The first iteration should be that simple, and the simple repo could do the beginning to just centralize, have a CSV listing all the existing schemas. That would be the first step for me. I agree, yeah.
And so I'm just saying, what I'm saying is Johan would love a developer type guy or person or woman who would like just want to hack with him for a couple of hours at some point and get that site up and running, like schemas.frictionlessdata.io, basically. Anyway, so advert over. I just want to emphasize that because I think that's one of the really major things we could launch in the next couple of months. Who would like to share next? So, of course, sorry, back to you, Gift. You're the chair. Sorry, I just want to jump in there and emphasize that. Yeah,
no problem. Yeah, who else would like to share? Who else would like to share something with the community?
Can I ask a question to Johan because it's related to the topic?
Yeah.
Which was the first step? Because I'm not right now in a project trying to, instead of consolidate all the specs, to show that have one good spec works. In a case that here in Brazil we have the justice system, and each entity in the justice system which runs in each state have autonomy to actually publish it. The thing I'm looking right now is salaries in the way they want, and that makes up a massive pile of inconsistent data that my project is trying to consolidate, and how I use frictionless data to actually publish a consolidated view of that. and I'm running a, a small scaled down version in one state which has four entities from the justice system. We're talking about the same system, and each one of them publishes data in different formats. So in the same state, Brazil is federated, so it's divided in states. So just for you guys to understand the complexity. Yeah. And I was quite interesting. I'm in a different boat, but interested in how this how did you guys started? What was the first step towards going top down? Because I don't know, it was first going one entity and show, oh, this works. Let's try to help me to join me to go to this other entity and show that it works, and then make it go up. Or you have already someone up that pushing the thing down. I think that was.
There are different cases. Some are top down, like first written as a law, and this law has been translated as a table schema, and this helps to improve, etc. But obviously, the better case is to start from the bottom, and that's what Open Data France, the French nonprofit, has done. Actually, they have started to make specification about datasets for some years, actually, before we arrived with the table schema proposition. So they had basically they had PDF describing the data, tabular data, of course. So they already wrote that, but it was in PDF, and when it was very difficult to change that and to follow that, because people were trying to follow like a PDF to publish the data. So there are many, obviously, human errors in that process. So the first need, actually, the first need that we addressed, that they wanted to have documentation, the PDF, but next generation of that documentation, and tooling to improve the quality, so validation, etc. And both were addressed by table schemas and good tables for the. But we actually wrote a library to make markdown from table schemas. So the documentation is created directly from the schema. So the source of truth is the schema, the JSON schema, table schema. And the documentation is created automatically from the schema. So when they update the schema, and they do a lot of times, sometimes it breaks stuff, and we actually also made a lot of acculturation about that, semantic versioning, stuff like that. But I will not talk about that. But yeah, so it was documentation and validation. And so they already had PDF specifications. And so we scrapped all that. It was difficult to convince them that it was the way to go, but there is no PDF anymore. And now it starts from the schema, and from the schema, they have documentation. They have a nice Gitbook website that they can also print. That's the point. They can have a button to print the PDF and have the date and the version of the schema. But previously, they had like many versions of the schema, and nobody knew what kind of version they had. Sometimes they published data in the wrong version of the old schema. It was very, very bad. So now, yeah, so it's the idea. But my advice would be to start from the data set that are existing now, how people are publishing data. And you say that organizations are publishing the same kind of data set, but with different, specification, different structure, different columns. And you want them to agree on one way to do that. Well, they should talk and agree on something. And I think most of the time it's the bigger actor that get to decide, or the ones that that decides. The one has the more, skin in the game, that will start to write this specification. But as soon as there is one version, the 0.0.1 version, people then can iterate on that, and the first one gets to decide, but it's not set in stone. And that is difficult to understand for this kind of, government actors. But once it's there and they have documentation that you know, is kind of WYSIWYG. They don't have to read the specifications. They can read the documentation that describe the schema with nice tables and, you know, and then as soon as they can validate and verify that their file is conform to the schema, they can see that, oh, it's not validated, but it should. It's a valid file. Why is not? So they get to, the point is that the schema is a source of truth, and people, you know, focus on that side, and then it can go up, and but it starts from the bottom and the very early draft of a schema, and that's where it starts. It should be that way, and but yeah, it depends from case to case.
Yeah, I think this the approach of first understand the differences between them and say, hey, you know, no one can actually take a look at the whole salaries, let's say, of the justice system in Brazil just because it's so, the way they publicize it is so complex and different. So I think the direction is that you suggested is more or less the direction I'm going, which is first trying to understand what is there and consolidate in one single spec, and then once we have one single spec and we manage to, let's say, open up 2 years of data in one spec of many different entities, say, okay, now we have some sort of, we are secure that this spec actually kind of works, and then we say, okay, this month and this month and this month and this month, you guys actually didn't, the data was not valid, and we got it because we have one spec. Once we have that first experience, I think we are going to have enough in our hands to go to the public leadership and say, look, that could be better. This is the proposal. Whatever.
Yeah, and the human nature will always be to complexify it. You know, they want it to be 100%, you know, reflective of the reality, and the reality is always complex. So you have to start really, really easy, very limited number of columns, very limited number of mandatory columns. The GTFS, you know, example is always my go-to. You have to be really easy, and that's the point of frictionless data, like Rafa said. So you start really easy, and then if people want to, you know, complexify it, they have to justify it, and there will be friction to that complexification once you have started easy, because it will break things. So and yeah, get people around the room, and people that want to spend the time to write that specification will spend it, but it should be really easy and start very easy. That's my advice.
Thank you, Johan. I just saw that Andre has his hand up. Do you have a question or?
Yes, indeed, I have a question, but I have a very bad connection, so maybe can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So my question is, I really like the table schema and frictionless data framework in general, but the thing which I think is missing is frictionless data is very good to describe your data and the structure of your data. But when it comes to describing keywords or a summary of or a presentation of your data set, there is no place for something like that. You can put a README for human being, but there is no machine readable metadata. And I'm wondering if you think about adding that to the frictionless data.
So Andre, if I'm understanding, when you say a machine readable description, there could be certain things you could mean. So you could mean that there's controlled vocabularies, like taxonomies.
Mm-hmm.
You could mean that the statistical summary of data. So for example, the ability in a table, in a data resource, so in a description of a table to say, hey, this table has, I don't know, 15 columns, the data in there are 20,000 rows. Those rows have an average value of X, that kind of information.
No, I mean, what I mean by metadata is the thing you will put to make your data set discoverable.
But
And this could be keywords or project names or this kind of things.
Yeah,
okay,
that's I posted a link to a proposition for pattern for metadata. You remember, Rufus, about that?
In the table schema or in the data package, Andre?
In the table schema, I think.
Yeah, I think in both, but in the data package would be nice already. Yes.
So in data package, you have keywords as an attribute. You have,
but it's not only keywords. It's also maybe an identification of a people that have worked on that, or an organization, a project, or anything that could make the discoverability of the data set easier.
So what I'm just trying to check with you is it already has contributors. It already has the source. It has what kind of fields, like you can add your own fields, but what kind of fields are missing at the moment from the data?
For the moment, for example, geographic coverage of the data.
Yeah. Temporal.
Something like that. Time coverage of the data, these kind of things.
Yeah. And just to say, so one is, I think the way to go, and this will relate to Carla's, I think here's on the call, is intentionally, there was a debate about, I actually originally had like temporal coverage in there, and I tried to kind of hone the data package required, or not even required, but listed fields to the absolute minimum that people might want within kind of reason. And then I think my hope would be that we start having agreed kind of like, I don't know what I'd like to call them, like, you know, when you have little sub packages of, or like little subsets of like, oh, I want to do temporal, like I kind of plug that in, that extension in. I want to do geographic coverage in the metadata. And the way I think we should go for that is to start having kind of community agreed patterns for the field names for that. And it relates to Carlos because there's an open issue he just opened, or Carlos, I'm going to pronounce your name correctly, on the specs repo, which is about saying, what's the convention for naming extra fields? And I think what we're about to do is have a namespace for that, and then start, I think, similarly actually to the table schema spec, which is about naming, in a way, having groups of columns, or having overall sets of columns. We can have overall sets of fields where people say, okay, I'm using this group of fields in my specification. In my data packages, you've always got to have, it's all about history. So it's always got to have time information, or it's all about geography. So it's always got to have geography information. And the way I really, you know, I don't know what the best analogy, but I like, you know, you don't want to overdo it. I'm trying to think of the best way it actually operates nowadays.
Doesn't this look like data package profiles that was used before?
Well, it's two parts. It's data package profiles plus groups of fields that you can say are part of your profile in a way. I think what he wants is both the overall profile, which exists. You can do that already. But he wants also what is almost like a registry of predefined additional metadata that you can kind of slot in, just like you have
exactly.
It's like an interface definition in code. Like he wants to be able to say, I'm implementing interface X. There was actually the point though, Daniel, is it can in the profiles. I mean, it was one of the points, which is you can implement multiple profiles. So you could say, I implement the geo profile, and that means I have these fields. And I think that's exactly what you're getting at. And that is the idea of that. That was why I built it in. I did worry I had done a Yagni. You ain't going to need it, but I think it will be useful ultimately. So yeah, Andre, great point. The way to go right now is to have a registry of those additional fields we'd like to see, and then use them in the profiles. And yeah, that's what it's there for. And I did think about geographic and temporal, and I kind of felt like they're like almost the immediate additional ones. And I feel also we don't always need to reinvent the wheel. It might be like schema.org already has like a bunch of geographic ones defined or something, and we could just say use schema.org field XYZ, you know?
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I suggested that because profiles currently is used to actually do some sort of pre-validation, but I don't see a problem to say just hook something in and let's go for it.
Totally. Great. I mean, just gift, I don't know the hour. I mean, I'm happy to keep going if there are people who are passionate and have questions haven't got answered. I'm here at people's disposal, but you might also, I don't know if you want to round out any part of this part of the call, just so if people do need to drop on the hour. But I just want to say I'm here other than the baby, which I probably will have to look after some more in some way or other, I'm kind of available.
Okay, great. I think we have some more information to share, Lily.
Yeah, if people are okay to stay on, I have a very quick update or two I can tell you about. The first one is about CSV conference, which is now going to be a completely virtual conference, which is happening in May. And this is a conference that the Frictionless Data team at Open Knowledge is involved with planning and organizing. And so there will be a few Frictionless related talks happening during the conference, but it's about CSV and data in general. So it's stories about data. And since it's virtual and completely online this year, it will be happening on May 13th and 14th at a few different time zones. I think we're going to try to do 7 hours a day so that people from around the world can join at times that are convenient. And everything will also be recorded and put on YouTube later in case talks are happening like while you're asleep. But I encourage everyone to look at that. Did I put it in the chat? Yeah, okay, great. And then the other thing I want to tell you about is the Tool Fund. And some of you have perhaps heard of the Tool Fund before. I'm also going to put that in the chat. There we go. Okay, so the Tool Fund is part of the Frictionless Data for Reproducible Research project. And this is kind of like a subset of the big Frictionless Data project. And it's focused specifically on applying frictionless data to research or to scientific disciplines. And so we've done a Tool Fund round in the past year, and Andre, who's on the call, was one of the recipients of the Tool Fund. And we are doing another round in the next few months. And this round is a little bit more specific. So we're looking for people that are interested in building tools based off of the open source frictionless code base. And these tools should be helpful for reproducible research in kind of a broad sense, but we're looking for them to be applicable to some more specific scientific disciplines this time around than the last time we did it. And so those fields are biology, genetics, neuroscience, ecology, geology, and bioinformatics. But we're also looking for funds from other scientific fields as well if you don't fit into one of those specifically. But please share or please apply if you know people that might be interested. And I think the other thing I wanted to tell you all about is that we also do a fellows program as part of the Reproducible Research Project, where we work with early career researchers to try and teach them about frictionless data and open science and how to use frictionless to make their own research more reproducible. And we'll be having another round of that as well in another few months. And we'll be posting all of that on Twitter and on the Frictionless Data websites as well. This might be a good time. I don't know if people, before I joined, talked about how Frictionless Data has a Twitter account now. Is that mentioned? Well,
No,
we have a Twitter account, so please go and follow it. It's Frictionless Data, but the data has an 8 in it. It's D8A. And I think that's it for me, but I would take questions if anybody has questions, but I'm also mindful of the time.
Lily, maybe just very quickly, if you just say 1 minute, 30 seconds about what kind of talks they're going to be at the CSV conf, how it'll be relevant to people here. I mean, there's going to be a lot of there's stuff very much relevant to frictionless data, but maybe just quickly anything there.
Sure. So I'm going to see if the schedule is listed on the website yet. The speakers, the talks are all on the website right now. So they're about open source tools, data communities, open government, some tooling, so some like R Markdown, some machine learning. Let's see, I'm scrolling through it really fast. Healthcare data, yeah, a lot of government data, healthcare, some science, and some like general community and teaching people about data as well. Those are kind of the main topics. Data journalism, that's on there too. It's pretty broad. And it's free.
Yeah. Yeah, looking forward to joining. And I think we've come to the end. It was scheduled to be an hour, but if, like Rufus said, if anybody else has anything to say, we could still take their questions or any other thing. Apart from that, thank you so much for joining our first virtual Hangout. Hoping to have more of this in the coming months. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. It was really cool to hear everybody's work.
The other thing is the GitHub repo is a lot more active. There's the project, we'll put it in the chat maybe, but there's the project board and the forum board. But like, if you want to collaborate, like we do sprint meetings every 2 weeks at the moment between Datopia and Open Knowledge, people would be welcome to come hang out if they wanted to, or if you want to check the board, we'll do an update maybe so people can start joining in if you want to hack on something, or, like Daniel, you got a question about Data Hub IO, ask it on the forum and, I'll probably answer. Just want to say that. And, Johan's looking for, anyone great here, be a volunteer to work with Johan in the next 2 weeks or, something, that would be awesome. He needs a couple of hours. Let's get that table schema catalog moving.
Great. Thank you all for joining. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.